Welcome back to Western Wild. This is Dylan. I'm here with our friend Winston from Scale of Two.
And now we're outside.
Back here today talking about the new Oregon Backcountry Discovery Route. This video is going to be part 2 of a 2-part series. The first part is available over on the Scale of Two channel. Put a link down in the description. We encourage you to check that out if you haven't watched it already. So last time we discussed general considerations about the Oregon Backcountry Discovery Route, gave a little bit of history to it, some pros, some cons, but today we are going to dive into a section-by-section overview of the new route, give you points of interest to look at, kind of general amount of time that you can expect to spend on each section, and yeah, give you a heads up for how to go about it.
Dylan's going to be talking for most of this video because I have most of my experience in the top portion of this route, but we're actually on a route that neither of us have explored at all, so we'll bring you some scenes from the section 4? 5? Section 4.
I think we're on section 6.
Section 6.
Yeah.
We're on section 6 of the Oregon Backcountry Discovery Route right now.
General considerations for this route before we dive into section by section. Grab gas at every stretch of the way. There are going to be long sections of this where you're going for several hundred miles without the opportunity to fill up the tanks. So definitely grab gas. Come plan with food for the entire period of time and even a couple extra days. Generally, for overall length of the trip, the RideBDR organization, I believe, recommends 1 section per day. So you're probably looking at like a 5 or 7 day trip if you're going to chunk this out all at once.
And we sort of discussed in the last video that there's a really optimal weather window for this route, so I feel like ideally it's probably maybe best to plan this in sections during different times of the year as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. The parts on the eastern part of the state are going to be better September, October. Western part of the state, you may be better off late July and August. Real great opportunity to break it up. You could probably run this in 2 long weekends. Okay, so we're going to run through this route from section 1 through 7 in order. I think a lot of people are probably going to take this in the reverse direction, starting closer to Portland Hood River and working their way down south. But for the sake of clarity, we're going to go from south to north the way that the route is prescribed. This technically starts in northern Nevada. I think pretty much for everybody, this is going to start in the Alvord Desert.
Yeah.
The Alvord is if you haven't been there, it's like a 5 by 15 mile wide dry lake bed that you can go out and camp on, sitting under Steens Mountain. Really gorgeous. It'd be a great staging place to start this route if you're coming from the Willamette Valley.
And you got a big group or something too.
Yep. Drive out like 7 hours, meet up there, get an early start the next day. From there you're going to run through Field Station, which is pretty much the only gas and food for like hundreds of miles. So definitely fuel up in that spot before you get kicked off with the route.
Another thing to consider if you didn't watch the first video is just be considerate of the shop owners there in Fields. Don't be rambunctious. Don't be too drunk.
That place gets, I've been there on Memorial Day weekend, it gets crazy.
Yeah.
Also, if you have extra gas cans, try to plan so that you have fuel to get through without stopping in Fields, because it can be a long wait. Kicking off the trip, you're kind of going through sagebrush, rolling hills, landscape. I haven't been on the road specifically that this route goes through, but I've spent a lot of time in the area. And some of these roads can get up pretty quickly. You're going like 30 to 45 miles per hour, so covering a lot of ground. Very open, very pretty. I think it's Beatty's Butte is the first real point of interest for the route. From what we've seen from the ORBDR video, definitely worth checking out that spot pop up. From there, you get out into the Heart Mountain National Wildlife Refuge. And this is a place that you really want to be considerate that this is a wildlife refuge and the route is drawing a lot of traffic through. Look out for antelope. There are literally thousands of them out there. It's pretty cool. Be respectful of other campers. Lots of people go out to this area for peace, so be mindful of that. The main route itself kind of does this curve through on a road through the refuge that is only open for part of the year. I would recommend it.
Do you know what the months are?
I can't remember off the top of the head. I'll put it down in the description. For 4x4s, I probably wouldn't recommend it. I've hiked through parts of this trail. I can see how it would be fun for ADVs, motorcyclers. In a 4x4, unless you have some really great articulation and you're in a skinny vehicle, it gets a little interesting. And if you get stuck in mud out there, there was recently somebody who got stuck in that area who popped up in one of the off-road recovery
I remember
groups.
that.
Yeah. That is one expensive tow bill, and you are a long way from help.
Pretty much anywhere out there, if you get stuck, it's you're kind of screwed.
Consider taking the bypass through the refuge. There is a beautiful campground in Heart Mountain. It gets very popular very quickly, so I would say don't plan on being able to camp there. If you go to the hot springs, be respectful. Again, a lot of people are going for peace. It's a cool site to wash up for the day, but be kind to others. Kicking out of Heart Mountain, the route out of Heart Mountain, utterly stunning shelf road, looking over. Sometimes of year the lakes are full and they're just, I don't know, it feels like you're like driving through Africa or something. It's like utterly gorgeous. And then from there,
we still haven't been down there. We got to get down there.
You got to change that soon. Maybe one of these summers here. Coming out of Heart Mountain, you pop down into Plush. That wraps up section 1 of the ORBDR. I would definitely gas up there, depending on how much you burned up, and get ready for section 2. All right, so jumping into section 2, starting in Plush and ending in Christmas Valley. I'd really describe this as the least interesting section. I mean, it's all beautiful, but there's not a lot of points of interest. These roads are wide open, very dry, very sparse. I think you can probably take this section pretty quickly. I would not recommend camping here. I'd recommend shooting through so that you have an extra day to hang out in section 3, which is a lot better.
Cool.
The one point of interest in section 2 is going to be the A6 intruder crash.
Yep.
I think that's right.
I think that's the name of it.
Yeah. We're not going to point you in the direction of it. Lots of information available on the internet, but if you want to go out, pay your respects to the service members who lost their lives out there, it is a pretty neat site.
Lots of videos on YouTube about it, so you can probably figure it out.
Plenty of guidance. Moving on to section 3, which takes you from Christmas Valley to Sunriver. This section is about 100 miles, almost exactly. And it'll probably take you 5 hours of drive time. But this is a spot where I would highly recommend spending a lot of time in. Just a ton of neat geological features, viewpoints, like even consider budgeting 2 days to do this section.
Definitely some of the best sites in Central Oregon right through this section.
I mean, just to name a few, you've got Crack in the Ground, the Lost Forest is out there, Christmas Valley Sand Dunes, further afield, Fort Rock, all of that. And as you get deeper into section 3, there's a turnoff for Pine Mountain Observatory, where you can pop up and have a great view. And around this time, also worth mentioning that this is where you get the transition from the very desolate, empty sagebrush terrain into more like juniper, and you start to see some ponderosa pine forest too.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat. It's a cool section.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
If you're new to Oregon, or if this is your first time really doing any sort of exploring in Oregon, Central Oregon is just some of the best sites you'll ever see. Truly.
It's why we live out there.
Yep.
Also in section 3, you'll find Newberry Volcanic Monument, Paulina Lakes, great spot to pop over, hop in the water, cool off a bit. Yep. So there's some neat hikes and viewpoints. Again, just really worth spending time with the detours in this section. Not long after that, you end up in Sunriver to wrap up the section. And from here, we're actually going to make the controversial recommendation that you consider skipping section 4 from Sunriver to Sisters. There's a couple reasons for this. One is that If you skip this section, you can drive through Bend.
And this is where the Oregon Beer Discovery Route starts.
And ends in many ways. Yeah, you can make a several-day trip out of that. You know, you're about halfway through the trip here. Great opportunity to maybe consider booking a hotel for a night.
Yeah, definitely.
I know that's heretical to some overlander types, but getting a comfy bed, getting a shower, like, it can rejuvenate you.
Yep.
Try out some breweries, spend some time.
Bend's a great town to go visit. Definitely one of the better stops along the way.
Yep. Then hop back on the trail. The main section for, or like the main route for section 4 takes you past Tumala Falls, which is pretty neat. And then it goes through a piece of road that may or may not be open in, I mean, even sometimes into late July.
Yeah.
This is closed. So be mindful if you're coming and trying to run this route early in the season, you might not even want to attempt it. Even if you're in August, like, take a look at where the closures are, ask around to some of the locals, and you can find out if that road is open to push through.
Yep.
From there, the route goes past Three Creeks Lake, and then it cuts into private land, which we kind of felt was an interesting choice. Massive private forest that sometimes is open to public use, but depending on the fire danger level, they will close it off.
It's called Skyline Forest, right?
Yeah, it's like Skyliner's Forest.
Yeah.
Currently a big effort to make it public,
Yep.
which would be cool to see.
Yep.
But for now, just be mindful, look on the map, get your private public land layers, and be respectful of property owners.
Yep. Yep.
If it's snowed in on the main route, there is an alternate that takes you closer to Highway 20 that I would highly recommend that a lot of people do, especially if you're going to swing through Bend. That would be the way to get to Sisters from there.
Another thing to note here is this where it really starts to change into more pine forest, and this is honestly one of my favorite sections of this route, and I just love the red pines and the red dirt.
So
it's
pretty.
just so beautiful. I love going out. I mean, if you've watched our channel, you've seen us go out there many times and just go find random spots to camp at. It's just so beautiful out there. You're getting views of the Sisters and all that stuff. It's great.
Ponderosas are easily our favorite type of forest.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, as Winston said, red pines and just like grasses, and it's like a fairy tale experience.
It really is.
As you come into the mountains and come into Sisters.
Yep. All right, so moving on to section 5, that's from Sisters to Detroit. It's about 85, 86 miles, roughly about 5 hours. And this is where things start to get a little bit busy, at least in the modern day context without this information being out there. And Dylan knows a little bit more about this than I do, but the sections kind of just northeast of the Sisters are very popular spots, lots of lakes to camp at and all that kind of stuff. So you'll likely have a hard time finding camp in this section. There is an offshoot to a mountain or an overlook called Cache Mountain. And I think for the most part, people recommend not doing that in your general overland 4x4 rigs because it's a really sketchy, thin shelf road, and I know Dylan's done it, so maybe he can tell us a little bit more about it.
It's all about the manzanita. Yeah, I learned the lesson on Cache Mountain the hard way. Had to do a pretty thorough, detailed job on my truck after the fact, and we only made it up a couple hundred yards before we ran into some ATVs coming down the other way who had absolutely no way to pass. They were pretty upset, and you know, I would only recommend it if you're doing this on an ADV or you have a super skinny 4x4. All right, so after Cache Mountain, the route goes through very beautiful lakes just to the east of Hoodoo Ski Resort. One thing that I will say here is that these are incredibly popular in the summertime anyway, so if you're coming through on the ORBDR on a weekend, don't plan on camping in this area. Like, you're not going to find something. There is a strong chance too that the route is going to be adjusted through here.
Yeah.
We've looked at the maps pretty thoroughly, and there doesn't seem to be an actual legal way to connect the route as prescribed. I actually reached out to the RideBDR organization, and they replied that they were aware of the issue and they were going to change it.
Okay. Cool.
So as you're getting ready for your trip, you know, if you're like us and have downloaded these routes like months out in advance, make sure to go through and download the most recent version of the map, because you'll see changes there.
Yep.
Another point through the Hoodoo area, there's an OHV park that the route goes through. The route itself, you don't need an OHV sticker, but as you're driving through, if you want to play off on any of the side roads, just be aware of the local regulations and make sure that you have the proper permits if you're going to go play out there. From this section, the route jumps back on the highway a little bit, back into the forest and back and forth as you progress out of the Ponderosa Pines, out of the Cascade Peaks, and into these lush green western Cascade forests that we're in right now.
And just to note here, this is the northern section of the northern part of Section 5 really starts to get into a heavy burn area. If you're aware, there was a pretty large wildfire here back in 2020 that ripped through Detroit, which is where Section 5 ends. So just be aware of that. We're kind of in the burn area right now. It looks nice and green behind us, but I think we're just kind of in a little bit of a bubble. So another fuel stop is Detroit, which is at the end of Section 5 and beginning of Section 6. The whole town did burn down about 3 years ago, so there's not much going on. There's a grocery store, there's some gas, and Detroit Lake is beautiful. It's a reservoir here in Oregon. Lots of little campgrounds along the lake and some lake sports and stuff like that to enjoy if you're into that kind of thing.
So, I mean, Detroit comes to mind when you know, the RideBDR organization has a side mission really to enrich local economies.
Yeah.
And bring people through who would not come through otherwise. There aren't many towns on this route that I would think of that way.
Yeah.
I mean, Sunriver, Bend, Sisters, Hood River, these are all tremendously popular tourist towns already. They don't need more traffic.
Yep.
Detroit may be one of the places where, like, come spend some money at the local store. Yep. There are new restaurants opening up. Yep. Like, you know, help to enrich this community that got hit hard by wildfire.
They're coming back for sure. Even just driving through today, it was very apparent that there's some new economic activity, which is nice to see, because it was really sad to see back in 2020. They really suffered some pretty bad devastation from those fires. A little anecdote about this section is we just went from the north part of Section 5 a little bit south to try and find a cool little spot to come and hang out and record this video, and we ran into some log trucks. There is logging activity, there's private land up there, and there's lots of gates too. We ran into a few gates that I think the loggers were letting us know that it was going to be shut down there at about 2:30, so we had to turn around and come back and find another spot.
I mean, that's a big part about these backcountry discovery routes. You know, they give you an opportunity to actually get out, do some adventure, and work around when you find obstacles, whether it's snow, fire closure, logging trucks, like private land pops up, whatever it may be. You know, it puts your navigation skills to the test.
Yep.
And one thing to consider there is that even though they lay it out quite nicely, you got to be prepared with some level of basic backcountry navigation to be able to get around the closures when you find them.
So moving on to Section 6, we've got Detroit to Government Camp, which is about 90 miles and 5 hours. Yeah,
give or take. Yeah.
Okay. So this section is kind of bring you through the majority of the burn area from that 2020 fire. Kind of climbs up through the mountains once you get out of Detroit, and there's two offshoots here. There's a bypass around Olali Lake, or you can take a little bit more of a scenic route and go check out Olali Lake. Unfortunately, I haven't been there. I've heard great things.
I mean, that that section is listed as TBD too, right? That
Yes.
They have the current route, as far as we know, goes through open roads, and then they have another option that is listed
Yes.
as a future route that will take you through to Olallie Lake and reconnect you.
So just be mindful of the closures. Get on Willamette National Forest website, get on Mount Hood National Forest website. They usually keep their road closures pretty up to date. So I know that part of this route goes through some of those closures, and I know they've tried to mitigate it with some of the offshoots and things like that. So just be up to date on the road closures. So if you do decide to go to Olallie Lake or take the bypass, you'll hit Forest Road 46 North, and the next kind of interesting stop along that route is Timothy Lake, and it's another kind of not touristy, but it's a popular spot in Mount Hood National Forest. It's a great little lake to go take a swim in. There's a bunch of campgrounds along the lake shore. There's lots of good dispersed camping along the lake shore. Probably shouldn't expect to find a spot there either, because during peak times it's pretty busy there almost every day. I've gone there on a Wednesday or Tuesday in the middle of the week, and it's pretty packed.
It's like the closer you get to Portland and the Willamette Valley in general, just the more people you run into.
Yeah, Timothy Lake's only about an hour and a half from Portland, so you'll definitely start to run into the weekenders from Portland.
I think another thing to mention about Section 6 and Section 5, really, that we didn't touch on, is just how bad the mosquitoes can be June, July, sometimes even into early August.
Yep.
So if you're trying to run the route on the earlier side, just be mindful of that. Come with your bug spray of choice.
Thermocils.
Yeah, long sleeve clothing. Make sure that the mosquito netting on whatever you're sleeping in is in good condition.
Absolutely.
Because it can get horrendous.
It's
like
terrible.
Biblical hordes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Section 6 wraps up in Government Camp, which we're continuing on the Oregon Brewery Discovery Route here. Well, I guess not really, actually. There's only one brewery there.
Is there one brewery in what is the brewery in Government
It's
Camp?
Mount Hood Brewery. They got good stuff. It's fine.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot better time at Hood River if you're trying to drink beer.
We're getting there.
Yeah, Government Camp is a cool little mountain town. It's, got some cool little bars and restaurants downtown. If you want to spend a little bit of time there, you could go up to Timberline Lodge, which is where they shot The Shining. It's the outside. They actually didn't shoot it inside. They shot it outside. But if you go to the front desk, they've got the Johnny's axe.
Ooh.
And you can take a picture with the axe.
That's a pro tip right there.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that one.
Yeah. And it just says, "Here's Johnny" on the handle. It's great.
So you can wrap up your Section 6 with Jack Nicholson's axe.
Yeah. All right, now, on to the section that I probably know the most about, is Section 7, which pretty much goes all the way along the east side of Mount Hood. What do we got for distance?
80 miles and probably about 4 hours of drive time.
If you're trying to cruise through this section, you could do it a lot faster, but I would recommend taking your time, enjoying the scenes. This is another part of the forest where Section 7 starts. It's another part of the forest that was a little bit burned back in 2020 and 2021. So there are some fire closures for some side forest roads, but still lots of beautiful spots to go and check out and camp. This is another section of the trail that, even without this information being out online, is already pretty packed. We do a lot of our quick weekend trips out here, so a lot of this information is already online. A lot of these campsites are already published online, which, to my chagrin, is true because I have to deal with it all. Just be aware, this is the old Barlow Road, so it's an old historic route. It's how a lot of early settlers came into Portland and the valley and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool history behind it all. It's not, I wouldn't say really anything along this trail, this entire route is technical or challenging. it's all pretty like graded forest roads and stuff like that. Don't expect anything too crazy.
The RideBDR organization did say that this was one of the spicier routes. You know, based on the map, I'm not entirely sure where those are going to be. But I would expect probably more just narrow, rocky forest roads is what you're going to encounter. These routes were laid out with motorcycles in mind, and the things that challenge a motorcycle are going to be different than what challenges a 4x4 driver. Just keep that in mind. If you find a section that's particularly rough, find a detour.
Yeah. Lots of ways to detour, especially once you get more north. You're pretty much riding right along Highway 35 on this route, but totally worth it. Very beautiful. Again, maybe don't expect to find too many campsites open unless you offshoot on some of these forest roads, which there's plenty, and there's plenty to find. I'd say 2 towns that you could check out here. Definitely check out Hood River there at the end, but just before Hood River is Parkdale, which is a very small little town, not a whole lot going on, but it's kind of a cool little historic town. It's got some restaurants and stuff like that. So it's technically called the Fruit Loop because it's where a lot of the fruit orchards are. So there's some wineries up there. There's some like you-pick apple orchards and stuff like that. So probably a cool spot if you have a family. If you're doing this with your family, go check that out.
It's another reason to do it in like September, October.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, when you can actually go and pick.
Yeah.
I mean, all signs kind of point to like that being the ideal time to do this trip.
Yep. On the home stretch, you end up in Hood River, and Hood River is a great little town. Tons of breweries. This is really where the brewery discovery starts.
The backcountry brewery discovery route.
Yeah. Don't try and buy a house in Hood River. It's very expensive. That's my sign off for Section 7.
You can finish the route, but then go home. Don't stay. That is
no purchasing
Winston's
houses.
pitch. Yeah. All right, so that about wraps it up for our section-by-section walkthrough of the ORBDR route. If you have questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them to the best of our ability in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, appreciate a sub on the Western Wild channel and the Scale of 2 channel. If you haven't checked out the first video in the series, hit the link in the description. Definitely go take a look. And then, yeah, we're looking forward to hearing about your journeys on the Oregon Backcountry Discovery Route, how that goes. Let us know what you think about various parts of the route, your own experiences.